Thank you very much for tuning in to That Will Never Work podcast. I have an individual here who is a master at visual storytelling, who helps speakers, trainers, consultants, authors, and coaches create compelling imagery that elevates their brand, builds credibility, and connects deeply with their audience. With nearly a decade of experience producing raw, real life moments as a field producer, Amari, his ability to capture genuine moments now serves thought leaders looking to communicate their expertise through powerful visual storytelling. A lot of us, we take these pictures with our phones and these type of things, but let's learn from an expert a little bit on how we need to upgrade our visual presence. We'll be right back after this.
Thank- Educate, empower, enable, impact. Thank you for tuning in to That Will Never Work, an award-winning podcast where we share inspiring information and personal experiences related to business and the entrepreneurial journey from those who are leaders in their respective field. Now, here's your host, author and business coach, Maurice.
I thank you for tuning in. I have none other than John DeMato. Thank you very much for coming on the show, sir.
The pleasure is all on this side of the camera, Maurice. Thanks for having me.
No problem. And so, we all think that we're great photographers. We think we could tell the best stories, because we have such a powerful device in our hand. But let me ask you a question, man. Are we doing a good job overall?
Are we doing a good job? Well, I guess the first thing that I would say to what you just said is rule number one, it's never the tech. It's always the operator. Because if I hand you my camera and said, go, would you feel comfortable being able to do that?
Me personally, no. I mean, I understand ISO just a little bit or things like I understand it to a degree, but no, not really, to be honest.
Right. And here's another thing. And I think you understand this as a coach and a business owner, as well as everyone listening to this conversation. Experts hire experts for a reason.
Yeah.
So the question really is, do you have the right people in place to be able to present yourself in the way that you need to be seen so that you're looked at as the authority in your space? That's what you need to figure out. Not, am I a good photographer? But do I have a photographer that takes great photos of me to help advance my goals for my business?
And here's the reason I'm asking this question. Are we good enough? Because people talk about, you have this computer in your hand 100% of the time. We can't let it go. We can't let it down. You hear all these things across the board, but, and you see people taking pictures online of their food and, hey, I've been to Puerto Rico or I've been to Aruba and things, but are we really telling where we're, a great story in our photography, that we're placing online? Does it really resonate with who we are? Like, have you noticed that we're missing the mark somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's two categories of photography. There's the photography that you're using to promote your business, promote your brand, promote how you solve your clients' problems. And then there's all the other crap that you photograph. As far as the other crap that you photograph, that, that it's up to the person whether or not they want to advance, whether they have a passion for, or whether they even want to think about pulling out a phone for their own purposes to take the pictures. That's up to them.
Hmm.
But when it comes to the photography that they use to promote their business, well, that's a completely different conversation.
Hmm.
That conversation involves a lot more than just how many megapixels does my phone have? Did you
Right.
see what you can do with the editing functions in the in-app camera phone? Blah 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 blah.
Hmm.
It,
Hmm.
it, it, it's beyond that because ultimately the goal of putting out your images
Hmm.
is to tell a visual story that not only shows how you can help those that you serve,
Hmm.
but also capture your essence and personality. So it gives your audience an opportunity to qualify whether or not A, they trust that you can, get into their world and help fix whatever's holding them back,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that they can stomach you long enough for whatever that length of time is that you work with them on a human being level, because we want to work with people that we like. We don't
Hmm.
want to work with people that are going to be a pain in the ass.
Right.
So when it comes to thinking about the types of photography that you put out into the world, it goes far beyond that of megapixels and autofocus and, you know, clone stamping out, coffee stains on your t-shirt.
So, first of all, let's rewind for a second, John, because you're such a straight shooter, right? You tell it like it is. I'm gonna be let's call it what it is right there. And some of us don't know how to deal with that because in you being such a straight shooter, we have to understand that in storytelling, that's what we're doing, right? We want to make sure that the story is clear and that is not confused. It's not all over the place.
Yeah.
So has that aura of yourself being such a straight shooter, has that helped you propel where you are today? Because a lot of times we're not honest with ourselves. So that's why I'm asking.
Many years ago at this point, when I quit my job in television and I started out as a headshot photographer,
Hmm.
I was petrified of everyone that came in front of the camera, and I simply was not myself.
Hmm.
Meaning, I was not direct, I was not honest, I was always trying to pussyfoot around issues. And it took me, I would say, and I refer to this when I talk to other photographers about this very topic,
Hmm.
as my creative crisis, meaning,
Really?
number one, what was the direction of where my business was going to go in terms of how I wanted to make a living? Because I realized shortly thereafter, I made the decision to be a headshot photographer that I didn't want to be a full time headshot photographer
Mm.
for many reasons. But the other piece to that was I need to I need to own who I am,
Hmm.
because I'm shortchanging the people that are in front of the camera, meaning by not being my full personality and projecting that during the session, projecting it before the session, during the session, and after the session, I was attracting the wrong types of people to work with.
Mm.
So, because, you aptly pointed out, I am a straight shooter, and it is 100% by design, by being that way, because I don't work well with people that don't resonate with that approach or
Hmm.
that type of building rapport in that way, because this is who I've been, and
Mm.
when I am, owning it and I'm doing that. I just had a session yesterday, and I did exactly the same tone that I just had by answering those first few questions, was the exact same tone that I provided during that session.
Hmm.
And I finished the photos this morning, sent them over to the client. I got a phone call on the way back from the gym, and it was from the client. Usually the client doesn't call the day after, but he said, I did not want to write down in a text or whatever to encapsulate how amazing I feel after looking at these pictures, because you nailed it. And then I'm like, we nailed it, collaboration, all of those things. But
Hmm.
the point being is that had I had that session 10, 11 years ago when I first started, the result wouldn't have been the same, because I wouldn't have been myself behind the camera to be able to bring out that person's essence. But we knew
Mm.
beforehand that the rapport was a connection. And that's one of the most important things for all business owners to understand. It's not just the portfolio and the price tag. You have to
Mm.
know if the photographer is strategic and know their demeanor and directing style to make sure that it resonates with you on a human being level to be able to produce extraordinary results.
Well, they say, pictures don't lie. You know, it pulls out everything. It shows you everything. It can show where you're not confident. It can show And that could be confidence on both ends because the person that you're taking a picture of, again, they're feeding off of you and
Yeah.
you telling them to pose and move this way, that way, headshot, lighting, all those type of things. And if they're not comfortable with you, the picture is going to show it. But it's funny because I'm saying this because you don't come off that way like you struggle with that confidence, right? If you're saying like this is where you were originally, why did you shrink a little bit? That's interesting.
Because I Well, it comes down to not having the reps. It
Hmm.
comes down to not knowing how to feel comfortable in my own skin for my own personal, reasons. There was a time in my life where I was over 300 pounds. I grew up in New York City in the 90s, and being overweight in a New York City high school in the 90s was not kind to me. It's still probably not kind to those now, but just speaking from my experience,
Right.
I was class salutatory and number two, but I was the most self deprecating, negative, self conscious human being that one could ever meet. In
Mm,
fact, I ran away from cameras when I was a kid up to my 20s, late
mm,
20s, early 30s. I would run away from cameras. I don't want to be in pictures because I don't want to be reminded of how much I hate the way I look.
mm,
And I think that that's an important piece, and it ties
mhm,
into my direct approach in that every person that gets in front of my camera, whether they are a emerging business owner or they're top of the food chain, it doesn't matter. Most of these people hate getting their picture taken.
mhm,
Most,
mhm,
not all, but most. And since I have such a deep insight into understanding how that feels to be uncomfortable in front of the camera, I use that experience to be able to, knock down those walls in different ways because of the fact that I put the time in beforehand to have a strategy session with these clients that are fairly lengthy to get a better understanding of who they are and who they serve, the
mhm,
problems they solve, and how they solve those problems. And while they're answering those questions and the back and forth is going, you're getting
mhm,
a real vibe to understand what they're reacting to. And I'm able to use that during the session to be able to keep them present in the moment and their guard is dropped so they're more open because as you mentioned before, it could be written all over their face if
mhm,
they're uncomfortable. And the truth is, if you don't have that rapport and you don't trust that that person behind the camera is going to take care of you,
mhm.
it will be written all over your face and then you just basically punched your ticket for finding another photographer and spend more money and get those
Mhm.
photos taken over because there's no way in hell that you're going to use the ones that were taken during that session.
Right, right. Wow, it's not often you find someone as authentic as yourself. Straight shooter, because we all, I liken to when my wife and I we talk, have a lot of conversations and we're talking to our kids about, hey, you're trying to date somebody, right? And when you're dating someone, when you first meet them, they meet the representative of you. They don't meet the authentic you, right? And we're trying to say, no, give a little bit more of yourself. I understand you're guarded a little bit, but give a little bit more so they know who you are from the beginning, and maybe they could put and you could find out who they are from the beginning. So
Yeah.
so I think that what we're talking about right now of being confident, understanding who you are, because even for you to not be confident in yourself, and you went to TV. Like, how much, that had to be a whole nother space, right? So how were you able to overcome these moments of insecurity, of self-confidence or self-deprecation, all these
Yeah.
type of things, because I'm pretty sure you didn't lose the weight, in 5 months, right? So how were you able to overcome that to get to a point where you can at least look in the mirror, quote unquote, right? Mirror, mirrorless, and understand this is who I am, and I'm confident in the clothes and the shirt that I'm wearing.
Well, when it comes to the personal side of this answer, it's I put in the work to understand more about why place, and it started with my up here. It didn't
Mm,
start at the gym.
mhm, mhm,
Therapy and some coaching and some positive psychology courses that I took.
Mhm.
I learned a lot about what motivates people,
Mhm.
and i.e., me,
Mhm.
and that went a long way to creating a lot of awareness around the self-defeating thoughts that existed in my mind on an endless loop,
Mm.
which created clinical depression and anxiety in certain spots of my earlier life.
Mhm.
And fortunately, while we're all a work in progress,
Yeah.
and I am by no means a finished product and probably never will be. And I'm okay with that because that's not the goal. Living a fulfilling life is, and I'm still on the search for understanding what that looks like to me.
Mhm.
But a big piece of that fulfillment is what I do with my clients.
Mhm.
And in terms of identifying that confidence, it all came from just putting in the reps.
Mhm. Mhm.
It and to another extent, the support of those that I serve, the validation that yes, these photos are valuable. Yes, what
Mhm.
you're doing is worthwhile. Yes, the purpose and meaning that you've found to monetize your art in a way that does not compromise your integrity
Mhm.
is working because we as a community of experts are able to leverage what you do in a myriad ways and just keep on the path. So it's a combination of putting out the work,
Mhm.
continuously refining the work, have an unquenchable thirst for better, listen to those that you serve,
Mm.
and make sure that everything's working, and just keep moving from there.
And I asked that question because a lot of times we don't want to look in the mirror. And I appreciate your authenticity. I appreciate your sharing this moment, of vulnerability. Because a lot of times we don't want to do this, especially as business owners. We have to put up this facade, where we could conquer the world. Well, we have to understand, like, hey, we're human too, right?
Yep.
And when we take a look in that mirror, or we take a look at that photograph, it's going to show. And so when we take that and people are looking at us, looking at our brand or whatever it is, if we don't show confidence, people aren't going to buy into us. People are not going to partner with us.
Ah,
And so that's why, you know, uh, we're going through some of these steps. We didn't go through all your steps. That's your John secret, right? Your secret sauce. But it's just these ideas of how we can get to a point where we're comfortable enough to tell our story that really supports our brand as they start to look at us in these visual perspectives. So that's what I'm just trying to understand that process. That's all.
yeah. I mean, the truth is, Maurice, if you're a service-based business,
Hmm.
you're in the business of building relationships.
Hmm.
And if you're in the business of building relationships, there has to be a certain level of sharing with those that are in your world or that you
Hmm.
want to bring into your world what it looks like to be in that world.
Right.
And if you don't, someone else will.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you're just going to become noise, and they're going to continue to search for the clear signal that's the solution to what's been holding them back.
Mm.
As a result, you really have to put the time in to be, even not even vulnerable, but just open
Hmm.
and be clear with what your value proposition is, what your promise is to them,
Hmm.
your expertise. Give them something to hang on to. And then on the other side of it, show them who you are. You
Hmm.
don't tell them who you are, but give them a piece that you feel comfortable sharing online, you know, whether it's with a professional photographer or even if it is with that, 75 megapixel cell phone camera that you got. In fact, you know, I joke about that, but the truth is you do need that.
Hmm.
You do need to because, most of the people that are listening to this don't have a paparazzi walking around with them
Right.
24/7, right?
Right.
So, there are those magic moments that happen throughout your day that are, business-based, life-based, but either way, they can be relevant and valuable to your audience for different reasons. And it's important to be consistent in sharing those things so that people keep you top of mind.
So you talk about these magic moments, right? Um, how do we even understand what the magic moments are, especially if people want to be so polished? Are magic moments in those places of vulnerability or, openness or whatever it is? Are those magic moments, or do I have to, for the ladies, do they have to be all makeup up, long eyelashes, all that type of stuff? Or are the magic in some of the more simpler things that you find?
Well, a magic moment is something that happens in your world that represents how you interact with the people that pay you money. So,
Mm.
if you're a speaker, for example, and you're on a stage, those are magic moments. When you're in that audience engaging with them, that's a magic moment. When you're taking selfies with them after the presentation, that's a magic moment. Before the keynote, if you're talking to the AV team or the event producer and
Mm.
having a conversation, that's a magic moment. And I can go on and on for workshops and
Mhm.
masterminds and coaching sessions and, you know, seminars, conferences, or, even a podcast, for example,
Mhm.
behind the scenes of a podcast. Like those are all magic moments. What they are those moments that gives a real genuine peek inside
Mm.
your world and specifically what it's like for those that need your help to be in that world.
Wow. You know, I want to get a little deeper into that. Because a lot of times, like you said, we don't have paparazzi. We don't have some of these National Enquirer magazines following us. You know?
Be thankful you don't. Going through your garbage and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Most of it's illegal, but we won't get into that.
I, I know. So if we you're talking about people taking, I mean, I'm sorry, you're talking about having these pictures taken or these moments captured. How do we do that if we're a one person show? How do we do that?
Okay. Well, the good news is everybody has a camera,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And in most cases, those cameras on your phone have front facing cameras. So if you are with a client, for example, yesterday, and not just yesterday, but
Hmm.
I've now made this a staple every time I photograph a branding session
Hmm.
with a client, or if I'm at an event with a client. Before I leave, after I pack up, I grab them and take a selfie with them. And then I share something about it online. Um, for people in your audience, depending upon what their sandbox looks like,
Hmm.
right? Idea would be to come in and think beforehand, strategically and intentionally about, you know, what are ways that I can share with my audience what's going on in this room
Mm.
before, during, after it. So if someone was running a 10-person mastermind in a boardroom, for example.
Hmm.
What does the boardroom look like beforehand? Well, take the camera out, use the normal camera on the back side of it, take
Hmm.
photos of the room, talk about that.
Mm.
During the session, take selfies with the participants in the room. Do that. If there's a group exercise, walk around, snap some photos of that. Share the interaction between all of the different people doing their things.
Mm.
And then afterwards, you know, you can probably grab that camera, put it in video mode, and ask people what were some of the takeaways that they had.
Mm.
You can mix in video if you want. You can also do the selfie thing. But the other thing I would do is encourage the people that were in that room to take photos with themselves and share
Mm.
their experiences and tag you
Hmm.
so that this becomes greater than just you narrating the whole experience because this is a shared experience. Whatever magic moment that happens
Hmm.
in these experts' lives, they're all shared experiences. Us as experts do
Mm.
not work in a silo.
Right.
There's people that are involved by the very nature of what we do.
Hmm.
Therefore, encourage them to contribute to the story as well. Because not only is it going to help promote future events, but
Hmm.
what it's also going to do is provide major insight for you into understanding the level of resonance that you had as an instructor, a facilitator, a trainer, fill in the blank,
Hmm.
in that moment, so that it helps you become a better trainer, facilitator, coach, whatever, fill in the blank.
Hmm.
So I encourage everyone, if they are a one person band and they don't have a photographer there, use the thing that is in your pocket 24/7 to capture those magic moments.
So, John, I mean, you've you've given a lot of information, and you've given moments that I need to do myself personally, to be honest, because I don't take my magic moments. I really don't. I don't even think about it half the time. But if for someone like myself that's struggling with that and need more information and more encouragement in it, where can they find you and talk to you about those, taking more advantage of that and making sure that it's actually embedded inside of me to do that? So where can they find you and talk to you about that stuff?
I'll answer that in 1 second, but let's start to break that problem that you have right now, Maurice. I
Hmm.
encourage you, before that we say goodbye,
Hmm.
do you have your phone handy?
I do.
Why don't you, instead of taking a screen grab of
Mhm.
this conversation, why
Right.
don't you just walk back, take and snap a photo of this? And I encourage you to talk about that very takeaway and share it online and tag me. How about we start that today?
Okay. Yeah, we could do that. Most definitely. We could definitely
I
do
put up
that.
a stupid smile for you. But yeah, but yeah, no, it's important, man. It's important to do that. But
Right.
for to go back to your original question, for more information on visual storytelling, what kind of photos do you need? Magic moments, the
Mhm.
core assets, what are the hidden details in your business? All of those things. How to leverage smartphone photos in a better way.
Mhm.
You go to my website. I got a blog sign up page. I send out a newsletter a couple days a week, and it is chock full of insights and actionable tips for everybody. And the other option is to stalk me on social. I got a Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook, all the things. It's on the bottom footer of the page, so I encourage you to do that as well.
Sure, sure, sure. No problem, John. I thank you very much for coming on the show. But I gotta ask you my would you rather question before we go. Now,
Okay.
before the show, we was talking about Eagles and things like that. So we're not going to talk
Oh,
about that, right? We're not
oh
going to get
God.
into that. Would you rather choose the Eagles or the Giants right now? So we ain't gonna do that. So what we will do though, would you rather choose three doors or a fork in the road?
Mm, I'm gonna go with the three doors.
Now, if I say to you, there, use your imagination. There's no parameters. Whatever one you choose, however you choose it, what they look like, all that type of stuff. Would that change your answer?
No,
Okay. So why would you choose
because
three doors? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
the reason why I would choose three doors is because there's a greater chance of having a higher outcome with three as opposed to two.
Okay.
So I'm rolling the dice.
You throw.
As opposed to a 50-50. Let's spread it out to 33 and change a pop, and I
Mm,
think I have a greater chance to, find my lucky pot of gold that way.
nice, nice. I mean, listen, man. Everybody has their choice. And I think it gives us a great insight of how you might look at business or personal asset. Whatever it might be. So I appreciate you. Rolling with the punches with that.
Yeah, of course. I know my numbers don't add up to have a greater probability, but in my head, the 3 over 2 makes more sense, that's why.
Well, again, there's no parameters, right? No one said you can't open up all three doors.
I didn't even think of that. See, yeah, but you've also asked that question 9 million times, so you know the whole jam about that. So I didn't even think about that.
No, it's again, it's all about how you perceive it. That's why I said no parameters, right? You know, I mean, because there's no right or wrong answer. It's how
Right.
it's how you live your life, how you move through business, how you think of yourself, all those type of things.
That's
It's
right.
a psychology part to that, but to me, it's just a fun way to end the podcast.
You know what I'm gonna do right now? I'm gonna go look up that question in ChatGPT, and I'm gonna find out what does that make me as a human being, and then I'm gonna be upset at probably finding out something bad.
Yo, I never even considered that. I might have to do that myself.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
funny.
that's happening.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on, bro.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure, no problem. And thank y'all very much for listening to That Will Never Work podcast. And I will talk to you just a little bit later.
Thanks for listening. Follow Maurice Chism on social media to stay connected and check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, that will never work. Or will it?